Kawartha Lakes draft budgets presented to Council. Dan Kearns, The Standard. Kawartha Lakes. City of Kawartha Lakes councillors were presented with the 2023 draft municipal budgets at the Council's last December meeting. The proposed operating, capital and special projects budgets combined equal $325 million. There are $56.6 million in proposed capital expenditures. This includes about $26 million for road projects, over $6 million for landfills, $4.8 million for city facilities, about $2.4 million for parks and cemeteries, and $15.6 million for fleet and equipment expenditures. There are also airport and information technology, IT, investments in the budget. This is basically what we should be spending each year without accounting for inflation, which is what we should spend on tax-supported capital, Adam Found, Kawartha Lakes Manager of Corporate Assets, told councillors at the meeting. Ward 1 Councillor Emmett Yeo questioned how the Ontario government's Bill 23 would affect the budget. The plan is staff will update Council on Bill 23 on January 10th, Mr. Found responded. Ward 4 Councillor Dan Joyce asked how much the city has spent on roads in previous years. Before we had a long-term financial plan, and before we had what I would say is an adequate asset management plan, probably that $26 million figure would have been more like $10 million, $15 million at best. So you can see there's been a huge shift in our focus when it comes to capital expenditures, Mr. Found stated. The 2023 proposed special projects budget includes $2.16 million in expenditures. Studies and plans make up the largest portion of this budget, at $790,000. IT and software improvements and potential Ontario Land Tribunal appeals funding are also in this budget. The proposed operating budget includes $236.5 million in expenses. In this budget, there is a proposal for a 3% tax levy increase. CAO Ron Taylor explained the full budget process would begin this month.
Local artist showcases work at Kent Farndale Gallery in Scugog. Courtney McClure, The Standard. Port Perry. In January 2023, Lauren Walker will showcase her art at the Kent Farndale Art Gallery in the Scugog Library. Her display opens on Saturday, January 7, 2023 at 2 p.m. The display will be up until February 3, 2023 for visitors to come and view during the library's open hours. She will be present on opening day and is inviting everyone within the community who is interested in seeing her artwork to come and check it out. Jennifer Back, the owner of Mrs. Field's Bakehouse on Queen Street in Port Perry, will provide refreshments at the showing. Lauren Walker is a local artist who grew up and still lives in Port Perry. Ms. Walker mainly works with acrylic paints and prefers them over watercolor paints. "I find acrylic is just easy to work with," said Ms. Walker. She described watercolors as challenging and needs a bit more practice before she uses them more frequently in her pieces. Ms. Walker created her first painting when she was in high school. She recalled the painting was black and white and featured the Beatles' John Lennon. "I didn't take painting seriously until about 2 years ago," explained Ms. Walker. That has since changed. Now, Ms. Walker said, she puts 100% of her effort into her paintings. She was pushed to put more effort into her paintings because she was dealing with a rough patch in her life. Painting was a great stress reliever for her, and she felt it strongly improved her mental health. "Painting allowed me to relax and focus on something other than what was going on," she said. Currently, Ms. Walker is working on a series titled Old and New Buildings of Port Perry. As the theme's title suggests, Ms. Walker has painted both old and newer buildings and landmarks found across her hometown, Port Perry. "It is a small town, and I think that's very special," explained Ms. Walker, talking about the theme of her upcoming art show at the Scugog Memorial Library. Completing this personal project has given Ms. Walker a new appreciation for the community Port Perry. "Port Perry and the people in it are my inspiration," she explained further. According to Ms. Walker, another reason she creates her artwork and uses Port Perry as a common muse is to honor the history of her hometown. To learn more about Lauren Walker and her work, check out her website at theartist-within.weebly.com, or you can visit her Facebook page under the display name Artists Within 86.
Where do fish go in the winter? By Geoff Carpentier. It's chilly again today, making me wonder what fish do when the water freezes. This is certainly an issue for fish in our part of the world. We know some remain active, or how else could our winter ice fishing industry survive? But do all fish swim around under the ice waiting for winter to end? The simple answer is no. So let's explore this a bit. First, we must understand something about lakes and rivers in winter. In smaller rivers, we can see how the flow of water around obstacles can keep part of the water open year-round, and therefore it remains oxygenated and is easier for fish to survive. However, lakes and larger rivers don't generally have this attribute, as they are completely ice-covered for months, so other factors must be at play. Lakes gradually freeze from top down, and usually there's a layer of unfrozen water below the ice pack. This is the layer the fishermen penetrate to catch those species that continue to swim all winter freely. Oxygen is critical to all life living in frozen ecosystems, so if the oxygen is completely depleted, everything will die. Oxygen levels change throughout the season and the lake. Since the bottom of the lake is the least oxygenated during winter, it would generally be fatal for fish to stay in the deepest parts of the lake throughout the entire winter period. Instead, it's better to stay at middle depths, as these tend not to freeze while still having sufficient oxygen available for the fish. Fish can use various techniques to survive. Some will flee the area before it freezes, but this requires suitable nearby habitats which will have both food and sufficient oxygen all winter. Others can move to areas of the lake or river which will remain highly oxygenated all year, such as inflows and outflows. Where the option to leave is not available, different species of fish will respond differently. Pike will remain quite active all winter, while bass will slow their metabolism, circulatory processes, and even respiration to the point where they are essentially immobile and just barely alive. This is called estivation. Many benthic, bottom-dwelling species move to the shallower areas of the lake, as these areas remain oxygenated throughout the entire water column, so they can find air at any depth. Some species, such as mud minnows, seek out air bubbles under the ice and use these as their oxygen source. Others, such as goby, will burrow into the mud at the bottom of the lake and enter estivation until conditions improve. Still, others get oxygen by absorbing it through their skin or into the blood vessels in the walls of their swim bladders, stomach, and gut. However, even with open water and ample oxygen, there's risk, as organisms and processes gradually deplete the available oxygen. Plants which produce oxygen all summer now consume it in the winter, further reducing available free oxygen needed by other living organisms. Fish are cold-blooded, but one of the perils of staying active in the winter is the fish have to offset the potential of hypothermia. On the coldest days, the colder water just below the surface can drop below 10 degrees Celsius, which is a critical temperature for fish to survive. I've already mentioned bass slow their processes to combat this, but other species, such as perch, do exactly the opposite. They increase their activity, which uses more energy and oxygen. Some species, such as pike, increase the oxygen levels of the adjacent waters where they swim. They remain active just below the underside of the ice and use their fins and gill plates to slowly move the water near them. Oxygen, frozen in the ice, is gradually released as the warmer currents created by the fish slowly melt the undersurface of the ice so the fish can breathe. Fish are a creative bunch, they have to be. Geoff Carpentier is a published author, expedition guide, and environmental consultant. Visit Geoff online on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. How Does Money Affect Your Well-Being? By Tina Y. Gerber-McCurley. You have worked hard but still struggle to pay bills and meet your family's needs. I have many younger and older friends who love to spend money on their children, grandchildren, or buy anything they want without a thought to when the bills arrive. I also know many who work 2 jobs just to make ends meet. The subject of money can make us feel uncomfortable. Still, we should be willing to talk about money, especially since we must manage it well to live well. When you're constantly worried about money and paying bills, as with other persistent worries, your body does react. Financial stress can result in significant mental health disorders. Feeling stressed and worried constantly, you may suffer headaches, heart palpitations, chest pains, weight loss or weight gain, and experience loss of sleep in your once peaceful world. We all occasionally experience financial troubles, living paycheck to paycheck, and often deal with unforeseen expenses to cover. This leaves us unprepared for emergencies and keeps us from having a fruitful and blessed retirement. Managing your physical and mental wellness and understanding how concern over finances and health are interconnected is important. If you are like many and making minimum payments or missing payments altogether, it's time to investigate why. Keeping up with the Joneses may exhaust you mentally, emotionally, physically, and financially. You may wonder how the Joneses can afford all the great stuff they have. Chances are they can't. So, while you may not have that new car or the latest gadget, the Joneses are actually worried and stressed. If you are feeling squeezed, it's time to spend some effort to get your life and budget back in order. Reading the Bible will help us understand what God says regarding debt. The Bible is full of wisdom about handling money according to God's teachings. It's tough to resist the world's way when it comes to money. The temptation may be from the idea you only live once, so indulge. However, God says, pay yourself by saving and then enjoy the fruits of your labor. Bible verses about money are frequently used in teaching about finances because there is a correlation between how we handle money and our faith. I'm no expert, but managing your finances certainly means finding the right balance between daily spending and paying down your debts. Decide on a strategy to pay off your debt based on the types of debt you have. Chat with your accountant or tax professional and get yourself back on track. In Hebrews 13:5, we are instructed to keep your life free from love of money and be content with what you have, for he has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. ESV, the English Standard Version.
A struggle up or an open meadow? Well, here we are again. We've broken through to the foothills of another new year. The dark days and any shadows in the valleys of 2022 are past, so to speak. But now we have a new climb ahead, to mount the peak of 2023. Anticipation of what may come can inspire, as can the entity of trepidation attempt to discourage us. So what is the task for today? Like each new day, it is to reflect on what has gone before and find the strength and good we can, then savor and nurture the life of it and build forward with what we have learned. These are the foothills, the stepping stools of yesterday, which can give us a leg up at the start of this fledgling year. If your 2022 year was fraught with disappointment, well then, you have an option of casting off the past and starting fresh. Problem 1. Some, while viewing this as a climb, may nervously think of the effort as a long, hard struggle uphill all the way. Others may see a parallel to the growth of good exercise, and therefore consider the work as a tool for gain. No doubt, as a climb, the latter is a more positive, potentially helpful point of view. Still, there are inherent oppositions to overcome, barriers, pitfalls, and the constant process of dodging that which seems determined to roll downhill. All this to master what a new year holds. Oh, what a potentially stress-induced experience. Many get overwhelmed, feeling they must be able to master all this from the start, becoming frozen because of the perceived volume of it all. Yet, most challenges are spaced out, strewn along the length of the year, and, being separate challenges, are not accumulative in their stress. Ironically, they may also work to expand our awareness, strengthening us and preparing us for what may come after. If one can grasp this nugget of truth, we can see this is what we all face at the beginning of any new endeavor. The vantage point of now, or even of our past, does not always prepare us to see the gifts God has planted. He, in His grace, has placed respites along the way, springs in our wilderness experiences, to aid us. God is faithful, and He will not let you be tempted beyond your ability, but with the temptation He will also provide a way of escape, a way through, that you may be able to endure it. 1 Corinthians 2:13, ESV, English Standard Version. And, for we are His workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand, that we should walk in them. Ephesians 2:10, ASV. So, if we open up to God, He will guarantee success as we follow along His purposes. Problem 2. The most prevalent influence in the physical world is the persistence of gravity. It's on everything. It adds the weight in everyday things. Our fettered emotional approaches in life mirror gravity's effects. Both are unseen, acting like a spider's web of strings attached to every moment, every relationship and goal we are entangled in. Each time we attempt to move anything forward, the string cheese of resistance attempts to drain our energy to keep us where we are. This comes from a long history of being knocked down and then cooperating with it. This is when we begin to live under it, rationalizing the cooperation so it will seem like foresight and wisdom. Most people like this attempt to convince others to look at life the same way because misery loves company. If one only sees the opposition, they will see some of what's there, yet not see what is good. While listening for any real wisdom from these people, we must be careful not to adopt their negative attitude. Staying down is the disgruntled premature decision to stop learning new things. I would advocate another way, a gentler way, and in this I include my Christian brothers and sisters too. Understanding spiritual life governs soulical, psychological life, which in turn governs our choices and actions in everyday physical experience. One must resign themselves to working in the spiritual part of life to gain success. Yet there is a bent to humanity, stimulating it to attempt to govern the spiritual as well. This is a mistake on reality. Things like proclamation of goals, guided meditation, and mantra-like repetition in what is called daily affirmation are asserted as if they are all spiritual work. Yet, in fact, they are all soulical works, meant to teach domination of our psychology in order, through that, to rule our physical lives. Mind over matter and so on type things. Well, a measure of this has its place to balance life, in the sense of self-control, and so security for some. Yet, there is such a thing as going too far in positive attitude. This mistake is based on the conceit we are the be-all and end-all of what our lives become. The flaw here is, any of this is only as good as the place these ideas come from. Where they come from provides the influence for reality, not us. Like in Acts 17:28, where it says, "And he gives us the power to live, to move, and to be who we are. We are his children, just as some of your poets have said." CEV, Contemporary English Version. In addition, in Hebrews 1:3 it says, "The Son, Jesus, is the radiance of God's glory, reality, and the exact representation, expression, of his being, sustaining all things by his powerful word." NIV, New International Version. Our role is in cooperating with him at best, or not getting in his way at the least. This is the ongoing operation of believing. For clarity, if an idea is our own, or even comes from a group focus, no persistent assertion of an idea will change things in any permanent way, not in a true sense. Of course, for a while it may remove conflict among people, but the same thing can lock groups in persistent stagnation with no real benefit to life. The point being, God governs the spiritual, and accordingly all other measures of reality. Consequently, in our ambition and naivete, we inevitably find ourselves in opposition to God, his good plans, and functional order of things. Even as Christians, though we carry God in the human form of Jesus Christ within us now, we still stumble in our efforts to live a self-determined life. That's the feeling of the uphill struggle. Maybe there's a meadow for you this year. The question is self-determination really the goal, in the way most approach it, or do we even properly understand what self-determined means in a spiritual sense? The dynamic sets up like this. God is ultimately and intimately what is best, in that he alone is aware of all things. His emanation keeps all things together. For by him were all things created, that are in heaven and that are in earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created by him and for him, and he is before all things, and by him all things consist. 1 Corinthians 16-17, KJV, King James Version. Without Jesus as our heart, we grope and feel our way through life, attempting to navigate a labyrinth of considerations without proper perception. It is impossible by our own efforts because we are not meant for, not designed for, this. Oh, the depth of the riches both of the wisdom and the knowledge of God! How unsearchable are his judgments, and his ways past tracing out. Romans 11:33, ASV, American Standard Version. Yet, this does not mean he will not share his wisdom and guide us if we will open up believe, and trust Him. So, among our enjoyment and progress of everyday life, we are designed to flow as an influence from Him to the lives around us. This finds itself in being there for others, like being the shoulder to cry on, or the one to laugh with, or the other set of hands on a couch when someone is moving, or giving the extra few bucks when someone needs. Better yet, if we take them out for a bite to eat, they can put the money they would have spent on this food toward their need. This empowers them to be able. Ultimately, this coming year is not just a climb alone. Can it be we've always been in this together? Just remember, God has plateaus teeming with life to enjoy for us to find along the way. Have a great 2023 and happy seasoning.
The Standard Podcast was produced by Greenstream Studio for the Standard newspaper.